we shall succeed. Hi, I'm Steve from 123D. Today we are going to do an unboxing, assembly and hopefully first prints on a Mark 4S with the Prusa original MMU3. Please stay tuned. So I shall proceed first and foremost to very carefully and precisely cut the packaging. Please take care when you're using sharp implements like knives. Paper and the paperwork with the cheat sheet attached on the back. Tools, a 3D printing handbook, the key ingredient, some printed parts, a bag of electrical connectors, grease, some couplers, magnet and other bits and pieces, an Extruder 4.4mm brass nozzle, V2 motors and expeller. So in there we appear to have 3 stacker motors, and here we have another box labelled MMU fasteners and plastic parts, so lots of bits and pieces in there, and another box which is labelled MMU spool holder and electronics. And then the very base of the box we have the bag, which is the S buffer plates for the MMU3 times 6 pieces of. So I shall pop the box on the floor. I shall place the Haribo in a strategic position because we may need to help ourselves to those as we progress throughout this journey that we're about to embark upon. I shall take a seat, and just to let you guys know, I have already opened up the Prusa assembly PDF for the MMU3. So after reading all the introduction and skipping through the parts that aren't applicable because it is like a universal guide, I have got down to chapter 4, which is the idler body assembly, and it shows you a picture of what you should have once you've finished this step. So I shall scroll down the page and it says tools necessary for this step. We have all of those here. There are 2 versions of the idler. The MMU3 idler can be used with the metal coupler, so one is highlighted green, the other one is the old MMU2S idler, which is orange. This kit should contain the new version parts for preparation. We shall proceed with that. So first thing to do is find those bits, which should not be in that box. They will probably be in this box. I'll get all these bits out and just strategically lay them out in front of me. We don't want to throw that away because that is a serial number and warning sticker, so we definitely need to keep that because it's very important. Should you need any warranty support or anything else for the machine, plastic parts, buffer parts, idler, we want that, and fasteners, buffer parts. It's one of the good things about anything that you get from Prusa, everything is very clearly labelled. So idler selector for MMU, I think we want that bag, but I'll get all the other bags out. This is the pulley body ELE MMU, so it's got some pulleys, collets and PTFE tube, some sleeve and a board apparently. So we'll pop that there, and this is the fasteners for the MMU unit itself. We shall get rid of that box. So referencing to the images that I have on the screen, I will find the corresponding printed part, which looks very much like that. And now I will find the other bits that it's asking. We have some little boxes here. There's a magnet, some blades, some more blades. The blades packages are very nicely marked with a big yellow triangle with a blade and a hand bandaged up. And we have a sensor. So in this bag here, I will get out the bearings. There is quite a lot more than 6 in here, but they do all appear to be the same size. 3, 4, 5 and 6, and we have these little metal shafts, and we want 5 of those. Don't roll away. It will be good to have a little tray, a lid for the tool set. Will stop things from escaping. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to pop them in there so they don't disappear off the table. So this part here is the first bit we want. The orientation on the picture that I'm looking at is showing it in that orientation. It's telling me to insert a bearing into the middle slot. We have a bearing that pops in here, and then if you line that up on the end, there is a hole. So from the opposite side, you've got a bigger hole. And look down the hole, make sure you select the right one that drops into there, and then we get that and slide that into there. And then it says for the 2.5mm Allen key, which I think is that one, we can then use that to push that rod into place. Give it a good push, because it was first off, it was blocking this hole here. That's where another bearing is going to go. So just make sure that it is pushed all the way home and then the bearing spins freely. Install the second bearing in the same way as the first one. So second bearing, next hole along, another pin in the hole in the corresponding hole, and repeat that process, making sure that is pushed home. Install the third bearing in the next hole. So if you look at the last one, there's 2 holes. The bearing wants to be sat downward position, so you want to go into the bottom hole, which is very tight. Ugh. Brute force, push, and then make sure it's pushed right the way home, so none of them are protruding in the end. And then all those 3 bearings now spin nice and freely. So I shall scroll down to the next part, part 2. Turn the idler around and continue with bearing assembly from the other side. So spin it around, we've got 2 more slots, and the holes now are on the opposite side. We want the first one in that bottom hole, to put them in that one first. Another pin, look down the end, make sure you get the right hole. Your Allen key again, make sure that's pushed back in. Last one in the bottom hole, pushed right the way in. And I got one too many bearings out, so I'm going to put the other one in the bag. First stage complete, and that is what you should end up with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bearings all around that part, and they all spin freely. Next step, number 6, idler center assembly. So take the remaining bearing and push it into the opening on the side of the idler, so into there, and make sure the bearing is flush and aligned with the surface, like so. So you can put it on a flat surface and give it a bit of a tap down to make sure that it's snugged home. Next is step 7. So in step 7, it is saying that we need a coupler, 4 M3 times 10 screws. So there is a coupler, and we want 2 grub screws. Okay, so MMU fasteners, I would imagine that they are going to be in this bag. So grub screws, we have 3, including 1 spare, which gives us the correct number for what we need for this part of this build. The other one is the M3 times 10. We need 4 of those. There is actually 38 in the bag, including a spare. So I'll carefully open the bag because I don't want all of them out. I only want 4 for this bit. So I'll pop them in there. I shall stick those out of the way for a minute. 2 of these grub screws out of this bag. The grub screws have already got blue thread lock already on them. The first part it is asking is take the coupler and insert the grub screws into both sides. So in the coupler, we've got a threaded hole that side of the collar and another threaded hole that side of the collar. So get the correct size Allen key, and then just insert that in that side. Grab the other one. Top tip, it's a lot easier to put the actual grub screw on the Allen key, then put it in the hole, than trying to grab that little tiny grub screw and put it in with your fingers. So just worthwhile noting that. Now I haven't wound these all the way in, just started them off. So it says make sure that none of the grub screws are protruding into the opening in the center, otherwise the coupler will be hard to slide onto the motor shaft later on. So if you look down the middle hole, you do not want them grub screws in that far that you can see them protruding into the hole in the middle, because that would give you a bad time and you will not be able to fit that to the end of the motor shaft without having to unwind it again, and you might not have the room to unwind it again. So what it's asking now is, on this end of the assembly, we need to install this coupler, and we do that by popping it on there, lining up the little holes, and then with these screws, that is what we secure it in place with. I'm looking at that way on, and it's saying to keep the grub screw alignment in a certain orientation. Now I can only assume that will be so that we can get access to them to tighten them up when we fit the motor to it. So that is what it's showing on the picture. So now I shall start to screw this into place. When I do anything like this, I always start all the screws off. Makes life a little bit easier if you've got something slightly off center so the holes don't line up, and you've tightened one of them all the way down. There's no wiggle room. For any of you who haven't built anything from Prusa before, it's actually quite a therapeutic process. The instructions are very, very clear, very detailed, very concise. If you are used to building Lego or Meccano, this will be a breeze. So once you've got them all lined up and started off, I then proceed to just nip them down. Bearing in mind you're putting screws here into a printed part, which is PETG. You don't need to go hell for leather and tighten them all the way down, because you're only going to strip the printed part out and then you're going to have to reprint another one. And I work in an opposing type order. So I've gone one, then the opposite one, then I've jumped to the other one, and then I'll go to the opposite one to that, just to make sure that it's all pulled down nice and evenly. Just check that they're all just nipped up to say you don't have to go mad. And at the end of that, you should have this. And then it says step 10, final check. Before you proceed, check the following. All of the screws that we've inserted, so the M3x10 screws, are tight. The grub screws are orientated properly without protruding into the center of the coupler. All 5 bearings are able to rotate, which they are, and the 6th bearing is flush with the surface. It is. So that is that. Complete. That wasn't too bad. Right, next step 11, idler body parts preparation. For this step, we need an idler motor ×1, the one with the short shaft. So that will be in this box. And it's really easy to tell because it's the one with the short shaft. The other ones have long shafts. Right, and it's also saying that we need the idler body, which is in the plastic parts bag, which is this big bit. And then we need 5 more of those M3x10 screws. I'll just pop these into my tray. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 M3 square nut. Just one of those. A silicone stopper. You can tell it's silicone because it's squidgy rubber. And we also want a shaft. So another one of these silver shafts. And that appears to be it. I always reference the pictures in the PDF to the orientation. I've got the part in front of me. It just makes working things out a whole lot easier. So, orientate the idler body as seen in the picture, which I've just explained. So it has it with the legs facing away from me. Insert the silicone stopper into the small opening in the idler body. So here, there is a little hole, and it is asking me to pop that silicone stopper into that hole. Get in, push it in, and keep pressing with your finger until you feel it fully engage in the opening. Well, yeah, I am trying. I think basically it should pop in and stay in, which it should. So I will gently use an Allen key to try and manipulate it into the hole so it stays in the hole. If it doesn't engage, try cleaning up the opening with an Allen key before rotating the stopper. Okay, so grab the Allen key and we'll just give that a swivel around in that hole in case there's any bits of print in there. And now, there we go. Perseverance shall prevail. So yeah, a little bit of wiggling. Then we have 3 arrows like that and like that. Basically saying, verify that it's seated properly and does not fall out. It's seated properly, as you can see, and it definitely does not fall out. And if you look underneath, you'll see where the little ribs are that actually pop through, and it is popped into place. Next up, idler installation. So this part, it wants to pop in here. Orientation wise is this way. Insert the idler into the body. Correct orientation is important. Make sure the middle bearing is pointing to the top. So middle bearing, top. Make sure the metal coupler is pointing towards the large hole in the opening in the idler body. So we drop that into there. Push the idler to the left. So push that back that way. Push the idler to the left so that there is as small a gap as possible. Right, that's pretty much it. And it's this bearing facing up. Next, center shaft assembly. So from this side, hold the idler in place with your hand and keep pushing on the actual part here up to the hole, and insert the shaft into the hole on the end. Push it all the way through. The shaft must engage with the bearing idler and use the Allen key. So basically, grab your Allen key again, hold that in place and make sure it's all snugged up. Secure the shaft in place by attaching an M3x10 screw into the marked position and then tighten up. So here, there is a little hole for a screw. I think what that does is actually blanks off the hole so that shaft can't come back out. So again, get your Allen key, screw into that hole and proceed to tighten that down. Step 15, idler body M3NS nut. So it wants us to pop in a little square hole here, this T-nut, square nut, not T-nut, sorry, into that hole. And then using a 1.5 Allen key, push that in all the way. And if you look in the bottom, there's a little hole you can see through to see that that square nut is pushed in far enough to allow you to get a screw through there at whatever point. Step 16, motor assembly. Before we add the motor to the assembly, we need to align the motor shaft to the idler coupler. So it wants us to have the motor with the wires facing up and the flat on the shaft to be facing up. Orientate the motor as shown in the picture. We turn the shaft so that our grub screw is facing up. So basically the grub screw will tighten down onto the flat on the motor shaft. So we slide that into place like so, insert the motor into the shaft, push the motor towards the idler body until it's flush. So basically the motor wants to be nice and snug against the printed part, and you want to ensure that that grub screw is actually going to bite down on the flat portion of the shaft. Insert 2 M3 screws into the holes marked. So if I flip it towards me, there's 2 holes. Grab my Allen key again and just hold the motor, pop them out. I am going to cheat because I can. I'm going to use a flexible shaft. 1, hold the wire out of the way, get the next one in. There we go. Now I've got that started off. Just make sure when you're putting these in that you actually get them in nice and straight. You don't want to be forcing them in and cross-threading anything. Just make sure that they're nicely snug down, which they are. Then it says from the opposite side, add another 2 into the opening. Okay, so on the back side, you can see we've got like 2 angled pockets. So use the ball-ended Allen key, because otherwise you will not get in there. So for those of you who don't know what a ball-ended Allen key is, it's basically an Allen key with a ball on the opposite end that allows you to rotate the screws in on an angle, because the actual ball will rotate. Very handy. So again, make sure they're snugged nicely, which they are. Now tighten up the first 2, which they're already tight. Super. So next part that it wouldn't like us to do is pull the idler right the way back, like that, and then make sure the grub screw in the metal coupler is still aligned with the flat part on the motor shaft. So obviously just check that that's all good, which we are. Rotate the shaft idler. First off, we need to tighten this one now, so a 2mm Allen key in the grub screw and basically crank that down, and then rotate the idler to get access to the other grub screw on the opposite side of the shaft, which this will be tightening down onto the round part of the shaft. Lovely. That appears to be that part of this debacle done. Next up, step 5, selector assembly. So for this part, we're going to need tools wise, pliers, screwdriver, spanner, Allen keys, and we'll need the selector assembly, which is this part. Then we need a magnet. I have seen magnets. There is a magnet. So in this little box, we have a magnet. I'm not going to get it out of the box just yet until I absolutely need it. We also need a ball. So I'll get down to those and I'll put that in my tray so it doesn't run away. With the part placed in that orientation, we have a little slot here which says insert the magnet into the marked opening on the selector. Push it in until it is flush with the surrounding surface. And grab the magnet, pop it in until you can feel it is absolutely flush with the surrounding surface. Then stand it back up like so. Insert the magnetic ball into the hole marked on the top of the selector. So here we have a hole. Drop the ball in the hole. The ball should be attracted to the magnet below and stay in place. If not, verify you are using the correct ball. So test this theory over my tray. The ball has not fell out. We have that part right. There is an opening on the side of the selector through which you can observe the ball's position. So if you turn it around, you can actually see the ball is in the correct position according to the diagram, and the magnet is also where it should be. So that part looks rosy. Step 4, we need a trapeze nut ×1, an M3 end nut. We also need an M3S, which is the square nut. We need 3 more M310 screws. Get all the bits ready first. 2 M310 screws, 1 square nut, so just a normal M3 hex nut. Pop them out of the way. So 1 trapeze nut. Okay, so first off, insert the M3 end nut into the hole marked. So on here, looking down there, we have a hexagonal hole. It wants us to pop that in there. And it says to do this, the easiest way is to get an M330 screw, screw it on and push it in with that screw. Makes perfect logical sense. It's quite a deep hole, so this method will make it very easy to just start the nut on the screw. Push that in that hole and then unscrew the screw. Just want to make sure that it is in there nice and square. It does wiggle about a little bit, so I think we're okay. So I'll stick that screw back in the bag because we don't need that for now. On the opposite side, we've got a square opening. So that is where it wants to insert the square M3 nut, which again, if you check the hole, you can see that it's inserted far enough to line up, which is good. Now it wants this on that little recess. So top and bottom holes line up. And then with the 2 screws that we have, we'll fix that down. It says tighten them just slightly for now. we will tighten them down fully later. Just get them in so that you've got a little bit of play on the trapeze nut. Next up, step 6, selector assembly, rods, cover and parts preparation. So we need more bits. So I'll keep these out of the way for a minute. We want 2 more of the square nuts. Then we want some brass bushing tubes. 2 of. 1, 2. Just make sure there's no bits floating around inside them. So then we want another 2 310 screws and a selector front plate, which is this one in here with a little brass insert. So in this part here, insert the bronze bushing tubes. I'm not sure if they're bronze or brass because it did say in the other one they're brass, and they definitely look like brass to me. Into the marked holes in the opening selector as far as you can using your hand. Make sure you are inserting them through the correct side. So looking at the orientation on the pictures, they have it with a cutout down, 2 holes here. Those brass tubes want to be pushed right the way in there. Quite snug, to say the least. There we go. The end of the tubes should be flush. So my ball came out. Make sure you don't lose your ball. Yeah, very tight they are. It's you push those in carefully. By pushing them again, you're not doing that carefully. I think by carefully means don't use anything sharp to hit them and distort the actual brass. We're quite fortunate. This is a relatively soft table, so bashing with the back of my hand, managed to get those bits into position without bending them or distorting them. Step 8, selector assembly, rods and cover. Insert the 2 square nuts into the relevant holes. So on this side, where you've got the trapeze nut fixed, you've got 2 more square holes. What it wants us to do is pop those into those 2 holes. Get your Allen key and just make sure that they're pushed right the way in. Check again that they're lined up, which they are. Attach the front plate with the screws and tighten them up. On this plate we have a bevel on 3 edges. Now it doesn't really give you any indication in this instruction other than make sure it's flush and flat with the end part of the selector. So what I'm going to make a decision on here is that this flat edge that hasn't got a bevel on it wants to be the same end as the trapeze nut. And then get your 2 screws, tighten them up. They are tight. I still have my ball in there. And step 9, selector assembly, finder parts preparation. This is a finder probe. We need that. We also need another M3 by 10 screw and square nut. So on this part again, with it in this orientation, we have another square slot in the top there. So it wants us to insert that square nut into that hole. Again, get your Allen key, push it in, make sure it's lined up to where it should be. Then we want to insert the finder sensor. So the finder sensor goes into this hole here. It says insert the super finder sensor into the corresponding opening in the selector. Adjust the position of the sensor so that the ends flush or slightly above the inner surface of the D-shaped opening on the side. Right, so we've got a little D-shaped window here, and what it's telling us to do is basically make sure that that sensor is in there, and if you eyeball through, you want it so it's flush to that opening. You can adjust this later on if you need to, but we'll get it as close as we can. Fix the probe in place with the M3 by 10mm screw. Tighten up so the sensor can no longer be moved. So for the hole above that, pop in that screw. That will then locate on that little square nut we popped in, and we'll tighten that up and the sensor can no longer be moved. Avoid over tightening the screws. The super finder is securely held in place. That's sufficient. There you go. Step 11, selector assembly and cutter parts preparation. So we need another square nut and another M3 by 10 screw. We need a blade holder, which is this printed part, and we need blades. Careful children, remember adult supervision may be required. So in here we have a couple of blades, 2 times stored in the box. In this part we have to be a bit careful with the cable. We shouldn't yank it, pull it or whatever. We've got another hole in the top and we'll put the square nut in that hole. Again, repeat, Allen key, push it in, make sure it's lined up. And then it is asking us to grab these 2 blades, and there's a little recess in the printed part here. Basically, we're going to make an arrow type shape. So grab one, just be careful, pop it in there, grab the other one, get that in the opposite position and pop that in there. So you're creating the cutting edge on the bottom. And then with this part, the image shows 2 dots, but we don't have 2 dots. We only have 1 dot that goes to this outside edge. So I'll carefully get that in there and line up that hole. Might actually be easier to start the screw off because that hole isn't the cleanest. So now I've got the screw in, we can line the screw hole up and then tighten that screw down. I'll hold the blades in place, and there's a little ridge on the top, and that just hooks over the top of this assembly. So once finished, should look a bit like that. Step 6, pulley body assembly. We've got all the tools. It does suggest that you need a measurement tool, in brackets optional. A digital caliper would work the best. We have a set of calipers, so I have taken advantage of that very, very kind prompt. Let us proceed. So it wants the puller body, which I think is this big bit in here. Not that bit, this bit. I'll put all the other bits back in that bag. So on this bit, and it's asking us for 3 more bearings, which is a good job because I only have 3 left, which is a good sign. It's simply a case of pushing these said bearings into the relevant positions, starting with this one. So again, push them in, make sure they're flush. The opposite side, lovely. And then there is another one in here, which is a little bit more of a, oh, there we go. So we have one there, and one in there. Next up, we want pulley body parts preparation. We're going to need a selection of bits and pieces, which let's start this bit there. So the front PTFE holder ×1, which is this part with the angled edge and the 5 holes in there. We also require 4 square nuts, 4 M3 10mm long screws, and PTFE tube. So 19mm long times 5 of calipers. We'll check. And those are the ones. So we want 5 of them. So I've got all the bits and pieces ready. I shall proceed with this part. So in the main body, insert the 4 nuts into the holes marked 1, 2, 3, 4. So the square nuts need to go in like a fit around like here again. Just make sure they're pushed right the way down. Check they line up with the holes, which they do. In the front, we've got a row of larger holes. So I think what it's asking us to do is the PTFE tube goes into those holes like so, like that. And then this piece, so the correct orientation for that is this beveled edge goes up to the top. There we go. So the chamfered bit goes to the bottom, the PTFE tube on the top, and then that leaves you the screw holes below, where we shall now put those in onto this bit. So with a little arrow facing away, these holes at the back, want a collet cushion into each one. So just be careful when you put them in that you don't bend the legs out. Slightly squeeze them together and then push them in. And I flip this over, and in there, get a long screw again and a little hex nut, and just insert them down into those holes, like in there. Done. Flip it back over, grab this arrow facing away from you, get your 10, put it in the hole. Don't put a lot of force on it until you've got it threaded in, because otherwise you'll just push that nut back out, and secure the collet holder in place like so. So that is now what we are looking like. Pulley motor parts preparation. So we want the motor, which will be in here. This time we want the one with the long smooth shaft. We'll take the other one out and leave it on there, and then we can get rid of that empty box. We want this bag, so it's telling us 5 of these. We want 1 square nut and 3 of the M3 10mm screws. Now on the shaft, where the orientation it's showing in the picture, it has the cable going away saying the flat side poking up, and the first one of these wants to go onto the shaft with a little grub screw facing up. The grub screw is in a bit far. There we go. So just loosen that off. Be sure the locking nut is on the top. We've got the little recess on it facing closest to the motor, and basically what it wants us to do is measure 30mm. So I'll set my calipers to 30mm, or as close to 30mm as I possibly can. 29.98, that's close enough. If I use that end, I should be able to line that up with the end there, which should in theory give me 30mm. Snug it down and I will check. Pretty bang on. Basically, repeat the grooves all facing the same way, ensuring all the grub screws on the flat on the top, and they're all snugged up to each other like that. We want to put this little square nut in the slot there, and then with the cable facing away and all of those grub screws facing up, pop that in that hole. I do believe it should go in that bearing. It is a bit tight. Insert the motor pulley as shown. Make sure the motor shaft has engaged into the bearing at the end of the groove, which it has, and then attach the motor with one screw at the top. So on the inside there's a little hole, and we'll get our ball and Allen key so we don't tighten it up, just so it holds the motor in place. Then we want to flip it over. On the bottom we have 2 more holes, so it's tightened down, then double back, and once they've done, tighten that one up like so. Step 13, pulley alignment. Warning in big bold red letters. This step is critical in order for the MMU unit to work properly. Please check your pulley alignment multiple times. So you need a piece of filament. Try and straighten it out as best as you can. Then feed it through the holes and out the other side. Grab your Allen key, check the alignment between the little metal extruder wheels and the filament for the holes, and check and adjust each one of them in turn. You're basically aiming for your filament to line up perfectly between the serrated teeth within those little wheels that are on that motor shaft. If you do not do this, you will end up with a bird's nest of filament inside your MMU unit basically, and you don't really want that to happen. So take your time with that bit, make sure you are happy. Once you are, ensure that all your grub screws are snugged into place. You don't want them coming loose. Take your time, check and check again, and then once you've checked again, check it again. Then you can move on. Step 14. Selector. Parts preparation. So for this we need this motor with the screw shaft on it, lead screw. We also need this that we prepared earlier. We need these 2 metal shafts, and then we need 2 square nuts, 3 of the M3 10mm screws. Taking the actual main selector assembly, first off we want to insert square nuts into, firstly, 1 in that hole and then 1 in this hole below it. Grab your Allen key, make sure they're pushed into the correct position. Next, it says to insert this position like so, and then insert the 2 shafts through the marked openings of the pulley body. Right, so shaft goes through that hole, lines up with that brass bush and goes into the other hole, and we'll repeat that with the bottom one. So slide the shaft through that bushing into the other hole, so we end up with that arrangement. So insert them fully until they're just below the surface, it says. So mine are nicely below the surface, and then verify you can slide the selector amount around freely, which, yeah, that moves around freely. We want to insert the motor with the wire facing up into that hole. Insert the selector motor so its trapezial shaft goes through the pulley body, see in the picture. Make sure the selector motor cable is pointing up before proceeding to attach the motor. Basically we need to wind the motor like so, and then it says leaving about 2 centimeters to the, so you want to leave right about 2 centimeters from this part to the end of the shaft, and then push that back. The motor body will then contact with the actual body. Once we've done that, it says flip it up on its side this way around, opposing diagonal corners. Just pop in one of them screws and just get them more or less all the way in, but not tight, using the ball end Allen key, otherwise you'll be there forever. Last screw in that hole, and then we will snug them down. Okay, there we go. So what it wants us to do now is slightly loosen, which they're not, or they're not a tight, because remember in the other step it told us to not tighten that up. Do not remove completely. Verify the selector can move when forced left and right. Should be no hiccups along the way. You will have to exert some force to move the motor as it has physical resistance. So we have no hiccups along the way. Superb. Move the motor selector all the way to the left hand side, so make sure now that it's hard up against the left hand side, and then fully secure the 2 screws to secure the trapeze nut. So those 2 screws that were loose we now want to ensure are tight. Step 19, idler body installation parts preparation. So this bit and lots more bits. So we want 2 of these short metal shafts, 1 square nut, 2 more M3 10mm screws, 2 M3 30mm screws, springs, 2 of these magical springs, 15 times 5. Firstly, it's showing this bit in that orientation, and it's saying to attach this part to this part like so. That hole there, take one of these metal shafts, slide it into there, push it in until it engages into the bearing pulley body, which we have done. Repeat the same on the opposite side with the other one. Basically what I've done now is create a hinge. Pivoting system, fix the shaft into place. So above them little holes where you've just popped that shaft in, there is another little hole. You're going to secure basically the shaft in place with a screw. The head of the screw partially covers the hole where the shaft is, and it will stop the shaft from falling out. Do the same on the opposite side. So that's that part. Open up the idler body like so. Insert the M3 square nut into that hole there. Insert that into, it's a little bit fiddly. You don't get them lined up perfectly with a hole. They're a bit awkward to get in. Shut that. Pop your springs onto the 2 30mm long screws. Pop them into the holes. There we go. And then tighten them down until the screws are just above the surface. They are just above the surface. So step 23, control board preparation. So I'll pop that over there. Show me a picture of this part. 3 of the hex nuts, 3 M3 6mm screws, and an electronical board, MMU control board ×1, which is in the other box. Control board with buttons. When handling control boards, try to handle them on the sides. Don't get your fingers all over them. We take this part, flip this bit over, and basically on the holes where it's showing, grab your little hex nuts and pop them in, and they're all in place. Lay that down. Grab your board with the buttons facing, they'll line up with the holes that are cut out in the print. Line up your little screw holes, fix it in place with the 3 M3 6mm. And there's a very interesting image. On the board I have a picture of a sheep, and under the sheep it says the sheep edition. I'm not even kidding. Step 25, PD board parts preparation. I need this little board, which is the MMU PD edition board add-on. We have the wire here for the MK4S kit. So in the picture it says a Mk3S plus. Because it's a Mark IV kit, we have got the correct cable included in the kit. And it also asks for this printed part, 1 square nut and 2 M3 18mm screws. Little board. I'll leave that on the packaging for now. So this printed part, like that, we line it up in the little tab, slide it into place like so. Once we've done that, with the whole thing facing me, these ports are where those connectors plug in, like that. So just make sure when you've done that, you are seated correctly. They're all the way in. Don't bend it backwards and forwards because you could break the connections. I think basically this plug now plugs into the socket there, and then with this assembly it's quite important that we get this one in the right orientation for the images, because otherwise we'll be plugging things in where they shouldn't be plugged in, and that wouldn't be at all good. So I'll start with this cable, this motor, with the little snap connector facing towards me from the right hand side. That is that motor. This motor is the next one along, and then we have the next stepper motor, 1, 2, 3, and then the Pinder sensor plugs into the next one along from that. Finder, not Pinder, Super Finder. Then we should have an empty socket, and then we've got the board where the board's plugged in. So that to me is looking fine. Another square nut goes in here. I think what it wants us to do now is flip the whole array over like so, and we've got 2 screw holes here and here, and then secure the board into place with those like so. So board's connected. Currently a bit of a jumble of wires at the back, but we will come back and tidy those up. Cable management. Okay, so I spin it around this way. It wants me to send that right to the other end, and then this cable here route around in such a way that we don't want to put any real force on that cable at all. Let me grab some zippy ties. First cable tie, it's saying place around about here. So what I'll do is I'll just loosely get them into place, And then I will make sure that my cable is very, very nice looking, which it is. And then I'll snug that like that. And then if we grab the back cable and bring that up, grab another cable tie, and now we're going to cable tie 3 cables together like that. Ensure it is moved all the way left. Arrange the super fender cable so that it joins the motor cables on the side of the unit as seen in the picture. Leave enough slack on the cable so it doesn't bend too much even when reaching the first filament position. So we don't want a lot of bendy bend. I could probably push a bit more of that through, to be fair. That's better. Like so. Right, so next it's asking you to go around the back. On the back here, first cable is basically giving the power and the signal and everything through one cable, which is very handy. Let me move this under there for starters, because that's going to be in my way. We'll grab a zippy tie. In the back here there's a little cutout in the print to allow us to put a cable tie through. That cable tie around there, and I'll put another one through there. Last but not least, one more, and then through there, that up there. Bish bash bosh, wham bam, thank you man. I need some side cutters. Snip snip. When you do this, whatever you do, don't snip the wire. My cable is managed. Stickers. Oh, we like stickers. Where art thou stickers? On this end of the gizmo, it would like me to stick this sticker. So I shall do exactly as I am instructed. If we flip the whole thing upside down, like so, this is the serial number now. The other one was a warning sticker. There is our serial number. Rear PTFE tubes. Preparation. Backside, like that. Basically now, 5 long tubes into the back. So, in sequence, pop these in. Make sure they are pushed in as far as they will go, like that. So, that is those in. Now it's telling me to undo the tensioner screws and open up the unit. Don't worry, the screws won't fall out because you've now captured them with this other mainboard holder doodly. Undo these like so. So you want to set in the idler tension, spin that around, and basically it's telling me adjust both the screws as slightly above the top surface, which they are. Right, so I've put the main unit out of the way for now because chapter 7, the spool holder assembly. Spool holder. We have 5 of these beautiful things to assemble. So we have these. Inside these, we pop a wheel that locates in the little recess, like so. And then we have another one, which we snap together, like so. Rinse and repeat. So these aren't handed, they're mirrored, so they fit together either way around. Now, we have a little sticky pad. It's showing on the image across the bend. So we want to put a foam strip, place a little foam pad across there. I think the only purpose of this is to give a little bit of friction between the base that slide to actually change the width of your spools that you're holding. And that's one. Now, the opposite way, one there, like that. So we have that part, spool holder, PTFE holder, plastic parts. So we shall get all of those out. And then with this bit, it's showing we don't have to slide. We can snap, or can we? Yep, we can. So clip it on the back, snap it on the front, line it up with that. Lovely. So now all we do is grab these little bits that we've already assembled and slide them into place. We have built the remaining spoolie holders. Next, the buffer. So these parts, this part, along with this part. 2 square nuts and 6 screws. First of all, peel off the film. So this part here locates in here, and you want to get it so it lines up as best as you can get it. Then, with your square nuts, proceed to place those, oh no, get those in those holes. There we go. Repeat the same on the other end. And then, this bit, we've got 2 in here. Square nuts everywhere! Just get an Allen key and make sure they are pushed in, which they appear to be. Jolly, jolly good. Okay, if we get one of these, put it on the table with that facing away. That locks into there like so. This then goes in that one like so. With it like it is, carefully repeat the process. Et voila. Now put in some screws. So that side. So this is the buffer. This is where the filament, when it's retracted, retreats to. Now it says we have plate holders. Et voila. Just take your time with that one. Don't tighten that up too much because it will bend. So next up we're on to, I've moved the buffer unit out of the way, and now we're going to do the cassettes. So I've opened that bag, and then we have 10 of those. We should have 5 wheels, which we do. We have a bag of gubbins, which contains bearings and little shafts. So I'm going to tip a load of these in because it wants 15. We'll bundle a load of them in as well. This will be, again, one. It'll be rinse and repeat 5 times. So first thing it's wanting us to do, grab a wheel out of this bag, get a little bearing, pop the bearing inside the middle of the wheel, which is very tight. That tight. And repeat this 4 times more. Pressed all those bearings in. Now it's wanting us in here to add our hex. And then grab that, pop a wheel on out of this bag, get one of the little metal shaft and put that through the bearing, which is easier said than done. So pliers, press it down, then take another half, pop that on, and then you want 3 screws. So we have that and that, and then it's telling me we're screwing through the blue one into plastic around the outside edges. So just be mindful, you're already screwing into plastic. Flip it over, do the opposing side. 1 done. So check it if you can. I mean, that is spinning very freely. Pop that aside, carry on.
5 minutes later.
So now, with the little cassettes assembled, we'll insert the collets into the bottoms. There is 2 holes. That is that done. Next, we shall insert these into there. So we have our buffer, we have our cassette, slot by slot. Like so. I'll turn it round because now more tube. So I will pop the tubes in where they're telling me to pop them into. And again, when doing this, just make sure that they're pushed in as far as you can. And then we will have one of these just to make everything neat and tidy. I think for today we will stop there. Monday morning I will prepare the printer.
The next day.
Oh, what a beautiful day. It's the next day. Well, it isn't actually. It's a couple of days after because we had a weekend break. So, yeah. Anyway, off camera, we did the Extruder upgrade, which I haven't bothered filming because it is relatively simple. You basically take out the initial springy ball bearing arrangement and replace it with another lever and magnet. Relatively simple. You also change back plate on the actual extruder itself to allow the little access for the arm lever to move where it needs to move. We've opened up the buddy board, and now I also opened up this little cover and removed the cable routing because the next part is to mount the MMU unit to the top of the machine. So, like so, it is mounted. Easy. Then with this cable here, we want to fish that down into the buddy box and then place the cover back and then fix it down with the screws that we removed it from it before. I will move around. Just going to put 1 screw in for now because the actual socket for the board is mounted just there, as if by magic. We'll probably arrange this with some zippy ties when we need to. But for now, that is perfect. And then pop the other screw in. So it may seem a little bit of a long-winded process, but overall, it's not that bad. Should grab our cover. Well, behold, that is this part of this ordeal completed. I shall consult with the manual to see what the next steps are. Now, Mr. Joseph Prusa would like us to download drivers and firmware. Okay. So, leave this page open. So, I will open another tab. Firmware for Mark 4S. Mark 4 and that is the one that we want. This is firmware version 6.2.3. I shall proceed to click download. And it has downloaded a zip file. Next, we want to open Prusa Slicer, and I shall select my Mark 4S, extract all, browse. I will put them on my desktop. Extract. There we go. And so I have Mark 4S firmware file and an MMU3 firmware file sorted. Open Prusa Slicer, Wizard Assistant from the menu. Configuration Wizard Assistant, Prusa Research. Find the Mark IV family and make sure that your model of printer is selected. So I shall now click Prusa Research and I shall scroll from the list of many. I will use the slider bar to navigate to the Mark 4S with MMU3 and I shall hit finish. I'll keep my settings. Now we have a purge tower and we have different colours of filament. Amazing, just like that. So we have our colours, the correct printer with the MMU3 with a high flow nozzle all showing. So I do believe that portion of this is correct. In the printer menu, select the MMU printer profile for future slicing. So that is there. We are good on that one. Next up, you will need to update both firmwares for the printer and as well as the MMU unit. Just use the newest firmware. Please refer to the MMU3 firmware. Download the latest version of firmware for your printer. Now, I've already done that. I have put those onto my desktop. Once we've extracted them, you will be given 2 files. So I have the actual printer firmware. Update the printer firmware first. Transfer the file onto the USB drive. I need a Prusa USB drive. I also need a cable and other equipment in order to fulfill this task, which I don't have any. Where's the USB drive, Chris? Is it in the printer? Amazing. It is in the printer. So for completing this step, the first thing that we need to do is examine the contents of the USB drive. This being Chris's own personal machine, it will be full of all kinds of things that we do not need. And I'm right, it's full. I'm going to do the real brutal thing. I'm deleting it all. It's all going. We don't need any of that. Goodbye. We have a clean canvas. The reason I've done that is because we don't want the old version of firmware on the USB drive before we pop that into the machine. Quite simply, now I shall go back to my desktop and find the firmware file for the printer and simply drag and drop it onto my USB. So I shall eject. First, transfer the firmware onto the USB drive, which we have done. Turn on the printer and connect the USB drive into it and press the reset button to restart it. Then select flash. Now, how it's telling you to do that there? Yep, you can. I normally put the USB drive into the printer and then turn it on because that saves you resetting it. So I shall come round to the printer. I shall insert the USB drive and I shall turn it on. And it would like us to flash. Yes, it is verifying the firmware. Flashing sometimes takes a while. We are now on 80%. Please be patient and bear with the process. It will be worthwhile. And there we go. Okay, next step. MMU3 control board firmware. Blah, 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 blah. Hex file. This firmware update must be applied directly to the MMU unit using a computer. We will flash the MMU unit firmware in the upcoming steps. So what I need to do is go into the settings and make sure that the MMU unit is turned on. So settings, MMU unit, continue. This will change the behavior of your filament sensor. Do you want to continue? It's telling me to click continue, which I've already done. The MMU3 firmware file needs to be flashed to the MMU unit itself. Find the micro USB connector, connect the unit through the cable to your computer. Right. So I have the cable in the box. On this side of the MMU, we have a little hole, and we plug that into there like so, and we plug the other one into your computer like so. So next, open Prusa Slicer, configuration, and flash printer firmware in the top menu. Hit browse and find the file. So I shall go Prusa Slicer, configuration, flash printer firmware, firmware image. So for that, it's the top menu, flash printer firmware, hit browse, and I shall look for the file on my desktop, which is there. MMU3, open. Serial port auto detected. And then it's basically telling me to just hit flash. So, status ready, hit flash, boosh. There is a message on the front of the printer and it does not tell me about this message on the front of the printer. Oh, that could be the reason why. Now I have lights all lit up like a Christmas tree. So let me try that process again. Flash. Oh, flashing has succeeded. We have flashed. There was a message on the screen telling me that I needed to then calibrate for filament. I left that open. That would not allow me to flash. So I just simply clicked abort at that point. So close that off and then the MMU sprung into life. Now it's telling me to disconnect the USB cable. I shall disconnect the USB cable. We shan't need that now. Hit next. Now we need to calibrate the planetary gearbox in the extruder. Go to the home screen and navigate to the control calibrations test. Scroll down and select gears calibration. Once you get to the gearbox alignment part, select continue. So because we've had the extruder in pieces, we need to now go and calibrate those bits again. So I shall go to calibrations and tests. Scroll down to gears calibration. So I shall click continue. Before you proceed, make sure the filament is unloaded from the extruder. We have no filament in there at all. So I shall click continue. Next up, it wants us to open this, and then I need a tool. So then I need to rotate each of the screws counterclockwise by a turn and a half. So these screws, roughly a turn and a half. The screw head should just be flush with the cover, which they pretty much are. Unlock the idle lever, which we have, so that's open. Continue. The gearbox will rotate. Please wait approximately 20 seconds. Okay, tighten the M3 screws firmly in the correct order as shown. So it shows me 1, 2, 3. Just tighten them back down and do not over tighten. So we definitely do not want to over tighten. Click continue, put the lever back, lock that into place. Calibration is done. Continue. Continue running calibration and tests. We don't need to do that, so we should quit. Next step. Okay, so the next step it's asking us to do is step 18, MMU filament sensor calibration. When the gearbox alignment is complete, you should then be prompted to continue to the filament sensor calibration. I wasn't prompted to. It asked me if I wanted to continue with calibrations. During the filament sensor calibration, you will need a short piece of filament. We need filament. There's no shortage of that around here. I have filament. Filament sensor calibration. So that is number 8 in our menu. Click on there. You will need to start without filament in the extruder. Please make sure there is no filament in the sensor. We have no filament in the sensor. Continue. Is filament in the filament sensor? No, because you told me that we shouldn't have any in there. So it is now reading. Now it's asking me, please insert the filament into the extruder until the sensor detects the filament. So, filament inserted. Press continue. So it's detected I have put filament in, and we've got a green tick. Continue. Calibrating. Do not remove the filament. Wow. That sped through all of that process. Finished. That is that done. Next. Footer adjustment. Turning on the MM unit automatically displays the filament sensor and fender sensor information on the status bar. If for some reason the information is not displayed and you want to adjust the order, then you can do. So I'll firstly check what information we have. Main menu. I have all the information that I need. So I have got here the nozzle temperature, bed temperature, filament sensor is off, and I presume that is the fender sensor there that is also saying off. So I appear to have all of the same bits of information as it is showing on the screen, and they are all showing the same things. So I can't see any issues with that one. We can arrange the order, which I'm not going to. There's no real need to. Next up, sensor values are shown under. So if I go to sensor info, see sensor info is actually under info, which makes perfect sense. So I shall click on that. All is golden under that menu. Next, you have built the MMU3. Amazing. The super fender sensor inside the selector must be calibrated. For factory assembled MMU3 units, the super fender is pre-calibrated. We don't have that luxury. So in the next step, we'll calibrate the sensor's position. It is critical that both filament sensor in the extruder and the super fender sensor function accurately. Otherwise, you will have trouble with the device. We don't want trouble. Use the inspection window on the selector to align the bottom of the sensor with the top of the window as a starting point. Now, we've already done this step when we actually assembled the machine. So in here, we have a little window which is up there, and it asked us to insert the sensor so it was flush with the window, because that is a good starting point. Now that is where I actually believe we are at. When the filament is in the selector, the steel ball will raise. It should be detected by the super fender sensor to ensure that the distance between the ball and the sensor is perfectly calibrated. Now, if we look at that, we put filament, before the filament hits the ball, it actually tells us, nope, off. And when it hits the ball, it will say on. Let's click next. So take a look at the super finder from above. Watch for the little red light inside the sensor to turn off when the filament raises the steel ball inside. So basically, if we put filament in, the light should turn off, which is currently glowing red. On the top of the actual sensor where the wire goes in, I can see a red glow. So when I pop the filament in, it turns off. And then if I take it out, it comes back on, as if by magic. And it is changing down here as well, so it's now on, off. Take that for a win. Fittings. So on the MMU, the PTFE tube that guides the filament is secured with an M5-4 pneumatic fitting. The older types of fitting have a blue collet. The MMU3 on the Mark IV printer requires the one with the black fitting, or the latest evolution of the blue one. All right. Basically, it's asking us to make sure we've got the one that's got the bigger hole. Internal diameter of 2.6 millimeters to be precise. So we have a length of tube, 1 left. We also have 2 fittings. We need to make sure that the tube that we have, both ends are trimmed nicely. You don't want them on the skew because it won't seat properly in the actual pneumatic fitting. So basically asking us to fit both fittings to the tube. So if you need to remove it, you pull the collet in and the tube will release. Attach the PTFE tube to the printer. One end goes into the selector, the other one goes into the extruder. Tighten the fittings using your uni wrench. I shall source the fittings and we shall fit PTFE tube. 2 fittings. Ours have black collars, which I only have 2 of them, so these have to be the right ones. And then I shall pop in one end, make sure it's pushed right in, seated. Then you grab the other end, the other fitting, push it right in again, make sure it's seated. Voila. All we need to do is screw one into there, do them finger tight to start with, and then we'll just snug them with the spanner. And the other one in the top of your extruder, like that. Take your uni wrench and just snug it down. You really don't need to force these. I mean, that one's threaded into brass, this one's going to be into aluminium. You're just looking to nip it up. You don't want to go mad at all. We shall proceed. Ooh, congratulations, the hardest part is over. Now it would like us to basically hook up the printer spools, the buffer unit, and all of that fun stuff. Then it's asking us to load up 5 different PLA filaments, cut the ends off to form a sharp tip. So again, standard practice, when you cut your filament, cut it with a 45-degree angle or thereabouts on the end of your filament, so you've got something that feeds in nicely. Right, so we've set up all of our arrangement. As you can see, it is not the cleanest looking, but I have seen plenty of models and files out there to finesse the whole arrangement, get rid of the buffer, incorporate it into basically the spool holders retract. We'll probably do that later on. First and foremost, getting this thing up and running. So we have put filament through the tubes into the buffer, out of the other side of the buffer. Next step, it would like us to preload to MMU. So go to filament, preload to MMU, select slot 1. The MMU will engage the idler into the first position and start rotating the pulley until the filament is loaded in. Keep pushing the corresponding filament into the PTFE tube with the buffer to the MMU until you feel the filament being pulled in. So basically, this is going to be a bit of a manual process. Right, so basically we've got to repeat that for each one. That's it, we're loaded with all 5. Go to the control panel, load settings. If we go to control and then scroll down to loading test, click on that. It appears to be working because it's put the right amount back into the buffer. And last but not least, 5. Just for the sake of it, just for peace of mind, I'm going to go back to number 1. We are golden. Next, we need to print the test object to verify everything works correctly. Don't worry, it will be a quick print. Visit MMU3. I will. 5 colour test for the Mark. Did it. Right, yep, we'll have that. So I downloaded the one for the Mark 4S. Pop in that, hit play, It's giving me colour choices, which I'm not going to change them. They are all PLA, and just, yeah, send it. So while this preheats, we shall cut there and we will be back shortly. Test print finished. So before I pull it off the plate and talk you through it, I'm just going to run down what I see on the screen. So I've got quite a lot of information here. Print time was 43 minutes. Printing started at given time, finished at given time. It's telling me the material usage. Total amount of material used for the white tower, 6 grams. So it tells me what is produced in waste and what the actual printed part is. So, I mean, to be fair, it printed without a hitch. It worked faultlessly. There was no errors encountered by failing to swap jams or anything like that. So as an initial test, I would call that a success. And there is the ring. Again, the print quality is really nice. It's Prusa at the end of the day. So the print quality hasn't changed at all from when we actually had the machine stock. The one thing that I would say is before you attempt to use the MMU3, make sure your printer is running as best as it can be. If you start in this modification with background problems already present in your printer, then it's going to make the MMU process harder because you're going to be combating a load of different things. Make sure your printer runs right before you do the upgrade for the MMU. The other thing that we touched upon was the arrangement. Now, the actual unit itself is very nice and compact, and I have already seen on printables there is a whole host of other files that allow you to compact all of this into a more user-friendly package. So that will be definitely something we will do. The main thing for us at this point in time was getting it set up, getting it calibrated, running off the initial prints, and obviously take it from there. We know it now works. We'll run some more test prints and we will post those on screen round about now. In the meantime, we will go away, we will pick out what's going to be the best solution for our use case. So, on that fine note, I hope you've enjoyed this video and you found it very informative. There is a lot there to go through. So, if you are interested in this product, the printer, or any other of our products, including our own brand range of filaments, please check out the link in the description below. And if you have any questions or you'd just like to leave a comment, please drop them in the box below, because we will do our utmost to answer your question as quickly as we can. And if you haven't done so already, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and if you really want to, share, because sharing is caring. Goodbye for now. See you on the next one.
As always, we aim to have the most competitive 3D printer prices on the market. If you see any of our printers being sold by a mainstream retailer for less, please drop us an email using the link in the description and we'll do our very best to beat their price. Also, if you're watching from outside the UK, check the description for links to our European 123 3D sister stores.